All right, here we go. Chapter 7, Classical Era Variations. We're going to be looking at Africa and the Americas from 500 BCE to 1200 CE. So this is a little bit of an overlap between your classical age and your post-classical. But when you look at the Americas and the later start that they have, this is really their classical age. And so that's why there's a little bit of a date separation there. If we look at the rest of the world that we've been studying, we've been looking at pretty much the classical age for the traditional time period of 500 to 500 or 500 to 600, whereas now we're going to be looking at the classical age in the Americas, and so our date will overlap a little bit here. But again, there's no worries when it comes to the AP exam because they will be pretty specific with time periods and dates as far as the specific date that they are wanting. All right, and so basically you guys should be able to understand the difference between what was happening in the Eastern Hemisphere versus what was happening in the Western Hemisphere. You should be able to understand the beginnings of civilizations in Africa and the Americas and the factors that were leading to the formation of those regions and, of course, their complex societies, whether they had a centralized state or a stateless society, such as in Africa, which we'll be looking at in a few moments. All right, so we're going to begin with Africa. And they really had no common cultural identity in the classical era. There's going to be a wide variety of areas. You have North Africa, you have West Africa, you have the Sahara Desert right there at that top middle region. You have East Africa, you have Central Africa, you have the Western coast, you have the Central Kingdoms, you're going to have South Africa. And of course, all of that's also divided by different types of climates, where you're going to have deserts. You're going to have one of the largest areas of a tropical center within the Congo region, going all the way from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Lake Victoria. And so you're going to have a wide array. This is also going to lead to a variety of areas where you're going to have some fertile soil, and then you're going to have areas where there's just not a lot of productive agriculture, even when you look at today in Africa, it's kind of the same thing. There's some areas that are very fertile and some areas that are definitely not. Also, this huge tropical area in the center of Africa is also going to cause a lot of disease problems, which are still affecting large parts of Africa today as well. Africa also shaped by interactions with nearby Eurasia and Arabia, so they'll have influence by the Roman Empire. We'll see some influence with Persia, the Indian Ocean trading network as well, and of course the domestication of camels, which will help the production of North Africa and its trade routes. All right, and here's a map. I would pause right here and kind of take a look at those trade routes. It's been on the AP exam a couple times. This will help break up Africa for you. You're going to see the Bantu migration on here, or at least where they started out. You'll see Nubia and Axum. You'll see the Congo region. You'll see Zimbabwe, which ends up later on we'll study a great kingdom in Zimbabwe. You'll see South Africa with the Kalahari Desert region area, the sand people down there. You'll see West Africa with the Niger River area and Genet, one of the major trading centers. Also Timbuktu and Gao, all major trading centers along that Niger River Valley. All right, Meroe, which was a continuation from the Nile River Valley civilization, which would be kind of a little bit further south, a little higher elevation there. And this will be your Nubian civilization that's going to emerge, even times taking over parts of the Egyptian civilization and ruling in their name, thinking that they were the rightful heirs and protectors of the Egyptian civilization. Constant interaction with the Egyptians and with the Arabian area and the Indian Ocean trading network remained a distinct civilization for centuries. They were one of the major civilizations that was on the Roman maps as being a sophisticated civilization because of their ironwork and their wealth, immense wealth, and their military power that they had in that area. All right, here's an image of some of their pyramids that they're going to have, which, of course, they were influenced by the Egyptians. All right, major long-distance trade was the source of much of their wealth and their military power that they're going to have. Less Egyptian influence than in the earlier times. Once Egypt has been already conquered and been controlled, they will be their own entity south of that area. They will have some struggles, though, with their decline because of deforestation and conquest by Axum. Of course, Christianity will come into this region as well under Axum. And then Islam will come later down in around the 1300s. And of course, Axum will become a major Christian kingdom in this area. So just in that northern part of Ethiopia is where they were located, present-day Ethiopia, that is. The kingdom's economic foundation was highly productive agriculture, which they had a little bit better agriculture than the rain-reliant Mori, who did not have a good irrigation system, even though they were extremely close to Egypt, who did. But they will have plow-based farming, which they were not reliant on your hoe and digging sticks like most of Africa. They were able to have some good plow-based with their cattle that they had. They'll also have a high production of wheat, barley, millet, and teff, which is a type of grass that is used for grain and flour. A substantial state emerged by about 50 CE, and they stimulated by the Red Sea and Indian Ocean trading networks, which will help their commerce, which was able to be taxed pretty heavily, so they had a good source of state revenue. Their capital city is going to be pretty sophisticated with some monumental buildings. They'll have some of those long pillar types that I'll show you a picture here in a second. Those are also going to be on the quiz, by the way, too. So a small little hint for those that are listening. Don't tell others. Tell them to listen to this. So anyway, also their language was Ge'ez, which was a combination of some mixtures from that area and some of the Arabian scripts that they had used for writing. Rural populous area spoke Agaw, which was one of the many dialects in that region, which there are still a multitude of dialects in that Ethiopian region to this day. Capital exerted loose control, mostly a collection of tributes, and they had a pretty decent military as well. They're going to convert to Christianity around the same time as Constantine with King Ezna, who will accept more of the Coptic Church, which had some disagreements on the deity of Christ and the Trinity and how that worked, and also dealing with baptism. And so there was a few disagreements on how that worked, but overall, following your Christian church that had been developing at that time. And here's the images. They're probably more than likely grave sites that were for your rulers during the time in the royal families. Here's one of your churches that you're going to have. This is one of your famous churches in Ethiopia. I'm hoping I can visit that when we go. It's a pretty famous site that I'd like to check out. 4th to 6th century CE, your imperial expansion into Meroe and Yemen. So even going over into Arabia as well, even getting up into Mecca, which is when they'll start to decline, which is around the same time that Islam's about to start to pick up. And so that will probably be why they weren't able to continue to spread. Plus, Mecca and Medina are going to be in a pretty big rival over trade, so that might have caused some problems and some hesitation of going into that area further. But we'll read about that later when we get to Islam. Revival of states several centuries later, but it's going to be a little bit further south, but it will continue with that Christian state. One of the only areas of Africa that was not, at least in North Africa, not heavily influenced by Islam. So there's the region on your map, and of course you can see the major trade routes that are going all the way up into the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Arabian, and of course out to India, which would be connected to your Indian Ocean trading network. There's major urbanization along the middle stretches of the Niger River in West Africa. So we're going to be kind of moving to the opposite side of Africa here. And this is going to be between 300 BCE and 900 CE. And you're going to have a migrations of people from the southern Sahara during long dry periods where the desert's continuing to expand with droughts. However, there's no real state structure in this area. So excluding the Egyptian, the Mori, and Axum region, the rest of Africa at this time is going to be a stateless society. So you're not having any type of empire or even really any type of city-state. It's where you're going to have groups of communities and towns gathered together pretty close to each other, and they will function and coexist. Obviously, you'll have some rivalries that will come to play and cause some problems in those regions, but you're not having any type of state structure at this moment. We'll later see some gunpowder empires when we get further into the post-classical era. Archaeologists have not found evidence of despotic power, widespread war, or deep social inequality, which is true of Africa as more women had higher roles within leadership and a lot more rights than in most societies during this time period and even into the future. Cities like Genet were clusters of economically specialized settlements, and so this is one of your major trading centers during this time period. Iron smelting was one of the earliest and most prestigious occupations. You also have gold mining, as well as they were able to use that to trade for salt, something that they were lacking in that region. All right, and here's an image of that. And you're kind of able to see where Timbuktu is. If you go just to the right of that a little bit, that's kind of Genet in that region as well. All right, villages of cotton weavers, potters, praise singers, or Groits, which they were also your kind of oral historians that would pass things down through songs, poems, things like that. As they didn't really have a written language until Islam is going to come in with Arabic, and it will combine with some of your local areas. Again, that's excluding your Egypt, Mori, and Axum region. Artisan communities became occupational castes, especially areas of artisans that were used for jewelry and bracelets and necklaces and earrings and piercings of types that were a little bit more common among your upper class people as well. Rural populace also specialized with fishing, rice, and cultivation that was occurring. The middle Niger cities were stimulated by a network of West African commerce, which we saw those trade routes on that previous map, and I think I'm going to show you the map again as well. That will help you out. Large-scale states emerged in West Africa in the second millennium, and we'll be studying those later down the road. All right, the movement of Bantu-speaking peoples into Africa and the South Equator. So they're going to be kind of around right where that horn is, the handle part of Africa and West Africa. Right, we're starting to get down to the forest plain region. We're going to see this area start to spread, more than likely due to a overlarge population that was starting to develop because of their knowledge of agriculture and how well that was producing. And that's what's going to help spread agriculture, is their ability to feed their population as they continue to spread throughout sub-Saharan Africa. And again, here's that map. You'll see the Bantu migration where they're going all the way over to East Africa, spreading down into the Zambian region as well, through the Congo, getting closer to South Africa. All right, cultural encounters. The Bantu-speaking peoples interacted with established societies. This is where you get a huge base, or language base, I should say, as a lot of languages can be based back to your Bantu-speaking people. Obviously, agriculture is going to be a huge aspect of their trade as they spread that. They'll have iron skills as well. And they will combine these hunting and gathering and semi-sedentary aspects as they continue to migrate. Survival of a few gathering and hunting peoples like the San, which will be much closer to South Africa. The Bantu peoples have preserved some of the languages and the ways of the people that they displaced. We will see the famous Batwa, the pygmy people in the forest areas that interacted with the Bantu. The Bantu culture changed because of the encounter with different peoples, and you end up with a huge mixture of these skills and cultures getting all the way down to the eastern and southern Africa region. Society and religion, creation of many distinct societies and cultures from 500 to 1500. Just some examples: Kenya, decision making by kinship and age structure. Zimbabwe and Lake Victoria region had larger kingdoms, which we'll learn about down the road. Actually, even a centralized kingdom. That was quite impressive. East African coast, after 1,000 rival city-states, which were pretty competitive within the Indian Ocean Trading Network and will be a huge route to Islam coming into Africa. Development deepened on larger number of factors within language, agriculture, craftsmanship, things like that. Again, here's your map. Obviously, I'm trying to hint at you what needs to be learned, but you can see the trade routes going down the east coast of Africa that are important. All right, religion placed less emphasis on a remote high god and more on ancestral or nature spirits. This is called Ammonism, to make sure that you know that term as well, since that was not used in this chapter. Sacrifices, especially cattle, to access power of dead ancestors. So this has to do with your burning altars that you're going to have. Power of charms was activated by proper rituals. This will be dealing with some of your kind of your medicine doctor slash your not necessarily witches, but kind of that elder belief in your sacrifices and mixture of types of herbs and things like that, and hallucinogens that would make people tell the future like oracles. Eventually, this is going to develop into more of a witchcraft system, which would be widespread and is still even widespread to this day, which deals with a lot of their myths and supernatural aspects from this time period that they are still dealing with right now in the current times. Based on the notion of continuous revelation, new messages still come from the world beyond. And so there is a comparison to the dream time in Australia, but this is distinctly different. No missionary impulse in this spread. It was just kind of, the Bantu helped spread it, but it was just in each region, their cultural aspects blended as they continued to spread themselves. All right, there was a lack of interaction with other major cultures. And so, sorry, my bad. We're looking at Mesoamerica now. And so there was a lack of interaction with other major cultures, including with other cultures in the Americas. And so we're going to not have a lot of connections like we saw in Africa, or like we have even seen among our other major classical civilizations that we've been studying in the previous chapters. And so a lot of the development will be separate. One of the reasons that we're not seeing a lot of interaction is because of the lack of large domesticated animals and ironworking. So we're not having any type of useful source to help with this long distance interaction. We'll see important civilizations develop out of Mesoamerica, such as the Aztecs and Incas, which we'll be studying later. This will be a good foundation for getting into those areas. And so we'll be looking at their agricultural technology, the economies that they did have. They did have some trade routes in Central America and along the Andes region. There will be some similar religious interaction that's going to happen. And we'll have some frequent interaction as people migrated, more so than actual continuous interaction like you had in the Eastern Hemisphere. And so here's your Central America. If you want to pause at this map and look at it, I'm not going to try and pronounce any of those because, again, I just butcher them. All right, the Maya writing and warfare, of course, which they'll be the most famous for, of course, their calendars and their Maya military that they're going to have. And so developed of advanced mathematical systems, your calendars, creation of the most elaborate writing system in the Americas, large monuments with temples, pyramids, palaces, public plazas, your city structure that you're going to have, which is all around that Yucatan Peninsula region. Here's an image of what their writing looked like. Here's an image of their calendar that they have. In the economy, you're going to have agriculture, which had a large-scale human engineering, swamp draining, terracing, water management systems. It was quite elaborate and impressive for this time period. Supported a substantial elite and artisan class, which is well known with the Mayan artisan and jewelry that has been found from these regions. Political system of city-states and regional kingdoms was highly fragmented during this time period. Frequent warfare, capture and sacrifices of prisoners. Normally it was your prisoners that were sacrificed. Densely populated urban and ceremonial centers, which for this region were boasting pretty high populations for this day and age. No city-state ever succeeded in creating a unified empire. We'll see those later down the road. Rapid collapse in the centuries after a long-term drought began in 840, which was a devastating part of their population, with losing estimates to 85%. But they're also going to have some external problems with warfare. There's also political disunity as they are fragmented regions. And warfare will be something that they are constantly having to deal with. Also, they will have spikes in their population, and they will have some deforestation and overuse of the land, which is going to strip it of its resources. One of your greatest American cities is going to be, however you pronounce that, which again, I'm horrible at pronouncing these, so we're just going to skip that. But this is one of the most centralized and planned out cities that we're going to be looking at. I'll show you an image here in a second. Specialized artisans. There's little evidence of how it was ruled and how the government worked, but you could tell that they had a pretty artistic life. They had architectural specialization, which there at least had to be some type of structured government, but were lacking any type of real written text that is understood from this area. We can tell there's a lot of areas for sacrifices based off of the customs of the other areas and regions, but there's also this mysterious collapse to the region as well. However, their military will be very influential on other areas throughout the Mesoamerica region, and even the copying of their cities and their architecture. So a huge influence over your Central America region. And so here's the layout that you can see with their streets and their grid systems that they're going to have. And if you keep looking further back into the picture, you can tell this isn't just what you're seeing right in front of you. The pyramids that they have, the larger pyramid, it's a pretty elaborate city that they have laid out. All right, civilizations of the Andes. So we're moving into South America now. We're going to look at a rich marine life with seabirds and fish. Strong cultivation in this area that will eventually see the rise of the Incas. So we'll see the Peruvian coast where you'll have Norte Chico, which will be one of your major Indian civilizations. This will be the Chavan region, which had a big religious movement. That is not a person, by the way. That is the actual location of the religious movement, which I'll show you a picture of that location here in a second. Huge area for trade routes. They had a pretty sophisticated road system that's going to develop. Also slightly dangerous with the high elevations within the Andes and drop-offs. which some of these road areas still exist today with major hiking, biking, and even some cars going along those regions. That's where you see some of those. If you ever watch one of those crazy car shows where they're major wrecks, and sometimes you're like, where are they driving? This is one of those areas. Beliefs apparently drew on both desert region and rainforests. You'll also have the San Pedro cactus, which is a hallucinogenic, which will involve some of their religious ceremonies and worships and intrinsic dances that they will have. They never really became an empire. We'll later see the Inca take rise in this area, and they're going to fade around 200 BCE. And so this is your major area of trade and religious movements that emerged. Here are all the areas of your agropastoralists, so agriculture and pastors developing in this region. And so I couldn't find one with a good road map, but all these were connected with roads, which is pretty impressive, which the Inca will be famous for their roads that we'll learn about later down the road, no pun intended, but when we get to that in the post-classical, we'll study it. Manche, which is a region in the Andes as well, which is going to flourish between 100 and 800 CE, and it's a huge area along the coast, stretching about 250 miles of an integrated area with agricultural based irrigation systems, ruled by warrior priests. Again, we're looking at the human sacrifices, which is pretty common among these areas. Huge pyramids, major rituals, again, hallucinogens involved in our ceremonies. Superb craftsmanship of the elite. Again, jewelry is famous in the Americas from this age. Many of the civilizations grew up from this area and will influence a lot of South America just from this coastal region. And again, there's that area that stretching that 250-mile region. Semi-sedentary peoples were established in the eastern woodlands of North America, Central America, the Caribbean islands, and the Amazon basin. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at the Chaco people and the Cahokia people. I'm probably not pronouncing the second one correctly. I know I'm pronouncing the first one fine, but the second one I'm probably not. So sorry about that. But pit houses and great houses, your ancestral pueblos, which this is a region I've always wanted to go to. Your kind of famous dugouts within your cliff sides. It's pretty amazing to see these areas in New Mexico and Arizona and the regions of that they exist. So southwestern North America began with maize cultivation and eventually settled down with their agriculture. And they'll have permanent villages with these pit houses and small settlements. Again, they had a lot of ceremonial structures. Some of the towns we've realized aren't necessarily towns, but a lot of them are religious ceremony areas, and then people lived a little bit further away, and they would just travel to the ceremonial sections. Local trading networks, which there will be some long-distance trade, which was more north and south in the Americas than in the Eastern Hemisphere, where we saw a lot of east and west, such as the Silk Road going all the way from the east to the west. Whereas in the Americas, it's a lot more north and south trade, which took a lot longer for trade to go that direction than it did in the Eastern Hemisphere. A development of large settlements, which are your pueblos. This is your Chaco Canyon region that I was just mentioning, with their great houses and 5 stories high with 6 rooms. Hundreds of roads radiate out of the Chaco region and canyon, which you can still see some of those today when you look at some satellite images of those regions. We'll also be going over to the mound builders, which will be your eastern woodlands. So we'll be getting into the Mississippi River Valley area, even getting up near kind of your St. Louis region, where you have some pretty large mounds. Even Tennessee and Kentucky and Ohio are known for their mound building regions that they're going to have. So you also have the famous Hopewell culture that gets established between 200 BCE and 400 CE. A lot of these regions, Indian groups will also be marked by the types of arrowheads that they have. Here's your Chaco Canyon that I was talking about. Here's one of the ceremonial areas that I was mentioning. All right, Hopewell, which was a large burial mounds and geometric earthworks, which I'll show you here a picture of an artisan picture of it in a second. But many artifacts have been found in them, evidence of extensive trade, careful astronomical orientation, which again, just because of being able to see all the stars in this region, which is very common in the classical age, in post-classical, being able to study the stars. Your Cahokia, which was your area, present-day St. Louis, Missouri area, flourished between 900 and 1250 CE, and the introduction of maize agriculture. They had a very large population. Terrace pyramids, which were obviously the pyramid type was very influential in the Americas. The different than your Egyptian, where you kind of have your flat sides. These were terraced ones. A community of about 10,000 people, widespread trade network, and apparently had a stratified class system as well. 16th century Europeans encountered similar chiefdoms among the Natchez and southwestern Mississippians that will be in that region. So they definitely influenced people even after they had started to collapse. You'll have a paramount chiefs, which are great sons, lived in luxury. Clearly you had a social elite and an upper class, but you obviously also had a lot of upper class people were required to marry commoners as well, which helped the very elite stay in power. And so you didn't have those marriage alliances sometimes. Significant military capacity as well that they will be able to, which they kept from their hunting and gathering days. All right, here's that image that I was talking about with your major town and area. And here are a lot of your Indian groups that will exist in the Americas. And that will conclude our chapter.